Welcome to Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing. What if you could learn from experienced real estate investors, find out what got them to where they are now, get insight into their daily habits, and take these insights to inspire your own growth? Each week, Jonathan Green shares an in-depth look at the mindful approach to real estate investing. Jonathan is a lifelong real estate investor, advisor, and coach, as well as the founder and team leader of Streamlined Properties. Whether you're looking to start from scratch, get to the next level, or just for a straightforward and honest approach to real estate investing, Jonathan seeks to provide a free mentorship program you can take with you anywhere. Now, here's Jonathan.
If you're a real estate investor and you've gone back and forth about getting your license and what it means to be an agent and how that could work with your investing business, we have a great show for you. And we is myself and my guest, Chantal Duame of Good Neighbor Realty. You're going to get a really good idea about how we both feel about being licensed, being an investor, and then how your experience as a real estate investor can absolutely be a windfall as an agent. Let's go. This is episode 137 of Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing with my guest, Chantal Duame. Chantal is the founder and managing partner of Good Neighbor Realty out in the Denver area. They work with investors that believe the good life, and we're going to get to this, includes a great real estate portfolio. Chantal, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Jonathan. I can't wait to dig in here.
Yeah, me too. And you come well recommended, as our previous guests, both Mike Brockway and Sina Getmiri were both like, you need to talk to Chantal. And I'm like, I'm already following her. I don't know why I haven't talked to her. So I'm excited to have you on the show and we could do this live or recorded for the future.
Yes, I'm so excited to be here. Those guys are great guys. Yeah, I'm lucky to be connected with them and have worked with them for sure.
Yeah. So with your story, were you an investor first or were you a realtor first?
So I was an investor first, or I like to think of myself as an investor first. And I never wanted to be a realtor. My business partner had to convince me to get my license because he was tired of listing the properties that we were finding for flips.
Yeah.
So that's how I ended up being a realtor. I originally, was just reading books on how to become a real estate investor. And it was like flips and wholesales. And then I was like, okay, this is the path. And I started doing that and then realized that getting my license would be a nice addition. And then everything changed after that.
Yeah, it's so interesting. We're going to get into that part because obviously I'm licensed too. And a lot of our friends, some are licensed, some aren't. If someone's listening and they're an investor, would you say it's a good idea to get your real estate license? Just on the basic yes or no question. I'm a hard yes. What are you?
I'm going to say no just because you said yes, and I could be convinced either way.
Now we can have a good debate as to why, though, because I've had this with other guests as well.
I'm going to take a no. And the reason is I don't believe you can be a good realtor that's part-time. And so something that is actually, admittedly, and I'll start this podcast by saying it, something that's a huge distraction for my personal investments is my real estate business. And so I think that while yes, in an ideal scenario, sure, you can represent yourself. You can save 3%. When you purchase a property, you can save 3%. When you list a property, you're learning everything that you need to know about doing comps and all of that good stuff. If you're not getting enough reps in, you're going to be so bad at those things. And so I just think that without the experience or the commitment to being a producer, you're never going to become a good realtor. And I think a good realtor far exceeds the 3% that you're going to save in trying to be an amateur to do it on your own.
That is fantastic. And I agree with that 100%. That's why I like to ask these questions. The reason I am a hard yes is for those people that we're talking about. I'm not into part-timers as well, because I think then you're not servicing your clients well, and you're also going to fail yourself, like you said. It's like I always liken it to, obviously, I was an attorney. I always liken it to someone being charged with a criminal case and then representing themselves. It's like, your freedom's on the line. You're not good at this. Don't do it. And I agree, a real estate agent, especially when looking for short-term and working in that capacity for investments, is worth well more than the amount that you would save. So we're on the same page there. I think for access, it's really, really good for investors, because if you're a new investor and you're also looking for a way to make extra money, and you can look at all the dumps that come out, you're getting those reps that you need by seeing properties, where these days we have so many investors who are like, oh, I've looked at 20 properties this week. I'm like, what? How many did you look at in person with your eyes and your nose and everything? They're like, oh, none. I'm just like playing around on the internet. And that's not going to work. Do you agree with that?
I totally agree with that. And I do think that you're right. Like, especially if you're someone that's like, I want to do this full time. And that's really what started it for me. I was like, I want to get into real estate investing full time, but I still need income. Otherwise, I have nothing to invest. And so if you're someone that's like, I still need income, I want my income to come from real estate as well, whether that's being a realtor or a flipper. And I think if you are a flipper, I actually am a hard yes on you getting your license. I don't agree with like the thought of, if you have your license, then you can't do as much as a flipper. I'm like, if you're an honest, ethical person, you're going to be fine with your license as a flipper.
Yeah. And I look at it as like, it's like a collective. I just like real estate. So when I got my license 10 years ago, my sister was like, dummy, we've been doing this for more than 20 years together. Like, why didn't you just have it before? I'm like, that's a really good point. And then I realized like it really is fun to do it together. And I know from the trajectory of what you do, you realize as an investor, you have so much more to offer than your traditional real estate agent, because 99% know nothing about investing. No offense to them. They're just not experienced enough to understand what investors want. Is that what's helped you kind of put these together like I do as well? I'm like, hey, this is just real estate. I like it all.
Yeah, I definitely think so. And I think you and I share this heart in like, it is so sad to me that realtors do not understand the fundamentals of real estate investing or
real estate. It's because that's real estate. Everything's an investment.
Yeah. Like, why would you even get into this space and not understand that? And that really, I think, for me, it comes from like I ended up leaving medical sales because I just didn't feel like I was contributing enough to the world in medical sales based off of what I was doing at that time. And so for me, being a realtor that just simply like opens doors and asks you if you want to write an offer, it's demeaning. Like, I have much to offer than that. And I think that, you share the same sentiment. Like, I want to know I'm spending all of my time learning as much as I can about real estate. And I want someone to work with me like they would work with an attorney, or they'd work with a professional that's really going to be a guide to them.
Yeah, I love that. Same for me. And I also think that gives us as professionals the leeway to say, you know what, I don't want to work with you. You're not really my ideal client looks for. Like investors, there's great investors and there's very annoying investors who are like, hey, I want you to put out 10 offers, all 200 grand below this week. I'm like, what? Why would that be a good use of my time? Just me personally, like, you have no respect for my time. Have you had to go through that as an agent, understanding like, hey, what you were like as an investor, and now you get people coming in? How hard has that been to kind of figure out what your ideal client is? And then we'll go back to how you were as an investor client before you were licensed.
Yeah. What's funny is I had one scenario where I just really did not want to work with this person. And he was saying that, he wanted to buy something on, 70 to 80% on the dollar. And, same thing, like wanted to send like
in Denver.
Yeah. In Denver, like wanted to send letters, and then he wanted it to be an Airbnb. And like, as you know, like not only are you looking for like a far undervalued property, but in a short-term rental friendly location, like it's just such a unicorn. And I was like, listen, if I find that, I'm buying it. Like, I'm not right filter for you.
Right. It's a 1 out of a million. So I'll have that. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And, I do think that if I had, and I think that this is sincere, like if I had a portion of my business, which frankly I'm thinking about, where we're like getting direct to sellers and generate more off market stuff, then sure. But I didn't have that set up in my business. And I was honest with him on that. And he ended up buying directly from a wholesaler, and I listed every one of his properties. And I think that for realtors that are listening to this, know your value proposition, be firm on that, be clear in that. And so they like, he had no second thoughts on who he was listing these properties with once he was done. And I could have ruined my relationship with him by doing something that like I was never going to deliver for him too.
Yeah. Yeah, of course. Under promise, over deliver. I mean, that's it. And or just be transparent about what you know and what you don't know. And that's where I think some people, even investors, get tripped up. Like a new investor can be a great asset to an agent, but they feel like, well, they don't have much to offer. Well, if you're pre-approved and you have your finances in order and you've really done your research and you know what you want and you just want to figure out, hey, I've done all this research, I know STR data, that's an ideal client for you, right? They're like, I want this or this, which one's better? And you can say this, I'll look for both. They're ready to go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. In short, my ideal client is someone who views real estate as a wealth vehicle and wants to build a portfolio over the long term. And I really love long-term relationships with my investors. I've kind of grown up with my investors because I started with baby investors, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I love it. And I think it is really helpful for investors to hear from agents who do business with investors about what we're looking for, because then that helps them find the right place. When you were an investor, where did you find your first agent?
Yeah. So, I mean, my story is a little bit different in that. So I quit my medical sales job. I was like pushing like pain cream that, 30 other reps had, and mine was nothing special. It didn't hurt anybody, but it wasn't life changing. And I was like, man, like I cannot do this for the rest of my life. And so I was listening to sales books, and you love them or hate them. I was listening to Grant Cardone, and he was like, you got to invest your money into real estate. And that led me into like, I need to figure out a way to put my active income into a passive income like vehicle. But I knew I hated medical sales. And so I was like, I need to get out of this. And so I was like, how do I make active income from real estate? That led me into flipping and wholesaling. And I basically got hired on by some guys who partnered together to open up their first like wholesaling business. And so my job was to actually go and find the deals. Oh. So the way that I got started was like door knocking, cold calling, working with pre-foreclosures. And so I didn't get to work directly with an agent. My first experience in real estate was partnering with real estate people. And then I ended up learning that real wealth is built by holding property. And I would say like my first like real investment into real estate was my first primary residence. And my business partner or owner of that company at the time was a licensed broker. He helped me through that. And I'm kind of like the easiest client ever. I know what I want. I
think I am too, but I think in some ways we're probably both hard because I know exactly what I want. I have no time for it not being that.
Yeah. Like I think when I think about me as a client, it would be really hard for people to send me things.
Yeah.
So I would be one of those that like, if I send you something, I'm probably going to buy it.
Right. Get on it right now. Yeah, I agree. I always tell the story. I was looking a long time ago. I'm old, so there was no internet. And I would just, you didn't have any good way to find an agent. There weren't as many agents then. So I would just find some. At the time, it was like an older lady. And I'm like, oh, she's nice. I feel like she's like my mom or my grandma. And we'd pull up to a property. I'm like, that's a no. She's like, no, come on, look at it. I'm like, no, it's a no. Don't art like I know it's a no. I know what I want. I don't want to look at that every day. I don't like that. And I think understanding investors, you can move quicker as an investor friendly agent because you understand like, hey, okay. And then you know when to push back. No, I know what you like. You need to see the inside because you're going to see how it's going to work.
Mm-hmm. Maybe that's the Florida in us. Maybe that like little like edge.
Yeah, I was looking in Florida then. It was just, well, you know how it is in Florida, and like there's a lot of developments. So you just pull up and now another shade of E-Crew that I can't change. I can't do it. I'm not going to do it. So what was the first property that you bought after your primary residence? And I also agree, like primary residence have been some of my best investments over my whole life.
Yeah. So my first property was that primary residence, and that one was really the catalyst for me. So I guess like to back up, I was doing the flipping, I was doing the wholesaling, I was working with foreclosure clients. And somehow during that process, my business partner now convinced me to get my license. And what I realized when I was going direct to seller was the volume was really low for me. And that was an important thing for me to realize, like, as a part of who I am. Like, I need a higher level of volume. I'm not someone who wants to chase 3 big deals a year. I like having multiple deals going at once.
Yeah.
And so I didn't like that. And then I realized that I could really help a lot of these people by being a great listing agent and then helping them deal with their foreclosure. So I first specialized in foreclosures. And then 2020 rolled around, we're expanding, we're getting into different states. I have bankruptcy attorneys sending me like 40 listings a year in this foreclosure space. Like things are going really, really well. And then all of a sudden the moratorium, and I'm not kidding, like that day, like I just remember like getting so emotional because I'm getting call after call after call. Hey, Chantal, moratorium like has been in place. I don't want to sell my home. And all like I lost like 5 listings.
Yeah.
I was in the height of this career, and my husband and I had just purchased our primary residence. And on a whim, we were like, let's just try to rent out the basement as a short-term rental because our long-term tenant friend fell through. And we were making like $3,000 a month on our basement in like 2017. And I was like, I didn't know that this was possible. I was thinking like $1,000 a month. Why is anybody talking about this? And so at that same time, I'm like showing up to meetups and people are talking to me about like their long-term rentals or this or that. And I was like, why is not everybody doing short-term rental? This is the best. The property is like perfectly maintained. I have a cleaner in there every 3 days. I never have to see my tenants. I'm paid on check-in and I'm making 3 times more than everyone. And so I just became like a natural evangelist for that. And then my husband and I ended up building a carriage home on that property. So we're like living upstairs, renting the basement for $3,000, built a carriage home, making $4,000 to $5,000 a month. So we're like literally living there and making like $4,000 in net, and then moved out of that one, ended up renting the unit that we were in for like another $4,000 to $5,000. And that was like a great first starter home for us. And it was a primary residence, 3.5% down, first purchase.
Wow. Yeah. And that's one property, 3 rentable units then.
Correct.
Yeah. Yeah. My dad was like that. My dad always made ADUs. We lived as kids like in ADUs and when I was there on the weekends. So like we were very familiar with multiple randoms, and he did a lot of random renting to people. We're like, hey, who's that lady who just came into the kitchen? He's like, oh, well, she rents on her side, but there's no kitchen there. I'm like, this is weird, but okay, this is how you make money. But that must have been really encouraging to be able to take 3 streams of income on a 3.5% down home and be like, wow, this can really work. And then obviously you kept doing it.
Yeah. And so that one, we purchased in 2017 for like $440, and it's like sweet for me to think about. And yeah, it was making like $140,000 a year. And so I was clearing like $80,000 on that first purchase. And even if I was to look at that property today, the value would be probably $850. Rates are at the time of this recording, like between 7 and 8%. And it would still be making me like $30,000 to $40,000.
Right. You'd still make money, which is crazy.
It's crazy. And so after that, I bought another primary residence. We didn't feel like living with anyone on that one, in an area where they had imposed a cap on like the number of short-term rental licenses that they were going to give out. And really my business was born from like a sincere curiosity in this space. Like I was committed to doing short-term rental. I wanted to learn all of the different places that I could legally do it. And I felt like everywhere that I turned, I was being told, no, you can't do it here. And so instead of getting discouraged, I was like, I'm going to find every place that I can legally own a non-primary resident short-term rental and compile a list. And really my business was born from that knowledge. It took weeks and like a lot of time on like the phone with city planners and like every intricacy, and it was difficult. But now I have this like Bible of Colorado, and I know all of the legislation. I know what you're allowed to do, and I focus with my investors on what can they do? Yeah. Instead of what can't you do?
Yeah, I think that's great. It reminds me of Derek Sherrill, that ADU guy, because his specialty is ADUs, and he'll know exactly what the ADU regulations are in every area to do it. So you've really set up something where no one's going to do the work. So you can say, well, they'll say, hey, I want this property. No, you can't do it. Like, that's our conversation. I know that you can't do it there. So let's focus. Do you like any of these 3? Because there's 4 licenses open there, or there's 20, or this one's wide open and there's not a lot of data there. Have you found that that accelerates the trust in you as an agent and as somebody who knows short-term rentals? Because like even people who play in the space, they don't know this type of information because they don't want to talk to city officials. It's annoying.
No, it's so annoying. And yeah, it's so nuanced and it's so detailed. And so yes, like having that specialty, like I get asked short-term rental questions all day, every day on like, can you do this? Can you do that? And like people now come to me with new information all the time, which I'm so grateful for. Like, hey,
Yeah.
did you do this? I live in this area, because they know that we're such like proponents for allowing short-term rentals. And like my team and I will show up at city meetings. And like
Yeah.
we last night had people that were fighting like a bad short-term rental bill. And that just really is a commitment of ours to stay on top of all of these things so our clients can trust us. But to your point, you know, if someone calls you and they're looking for something, a lot of times an investor will call you and they'll say that they know exactly what they're looking for, but they don't know what they don't know. And so I'm constantly like receiving calls and they'll be like, okay, Chantal, like I need to be in Denver Metro and I need to make like 15 to 25% cash on cash return. And I want it to be low maintenance. And so it needs to be a condo. And, you know, I want to stay under $500,000. And I'm like, no.
And no HOA. Like these things aren't all adding up right now.
Right. But instead of being like, sorry, that's not possible, I'm like, okay, so are you in this to make money or are you looking for something that you want as a lifestyle investment?
Yeah.
And I'm in this to make money. I'm like, let's talk about the best places for you to make money with 500K and let's go from there.
Yeah, I think that provides a healthy alternative. And again, it's another way to just build the trust, you know, to show like, I know things and what your plan sounds good in practice because it looks like a spreadsheet plan, which is what a lot of people have, but it doesn't always work out like that. I also think with limited licenses in areas, if you've built things the way we were talking about in the beginning through transparency and working with the city and really finding out like, hey, this is what I want to do. Is this feasible? You're more likely to get those licenses if you're involved. You know, everybody knows that city politics are real. And if they know they can rely on you to do what you say and you have a track record of short-term rental of, you know, your own and helping other people do it, they know that you're going to follow the regulations, or if they require like small taxes on it, that you're going to take care of that. I think that's really important. Have you found that building those relationships has helped you, especially guiding investors, but also working with other cities because you already know what the municipality game is like?
Yeah, I'm actually so surprised at how impactful it is to have people show up and advocate, because when you think about it, they're city officials, they're public servants, they're there to hear what the community wants. And a lot of times the only people that are showing up are people that are really angry and and like they don't represent themselves well either. And so if you have respectful people showing up and saying like, hey, I want this community to be a great community as well. I want to be respectful. I want to keep my neighbors happy. In fact, I want them to have a place that their family can stay when they come and visit. The county is going to hear that, and it really does impact like the decisions that they make from a legislative standpoint. And so I feel very much that we've impacted legislation in our local market more than anything.
Yeah, and I think you can have a kind of soft landing spot for the residents who are, you know, uninformed and against short-term rentals. Like, of course, in some contexts, regular residential neighborhoods aren't super pumped about having someone next door. But unless you say, hey, why don't you just go look at our hosting score? And those are the type of clients that we bring in and the reviews, like you can tell they're nice. Like nobody's had a problem with them. Do you think that also helps? I mean, just running something where you know what you're doing because that's your expertise.
Yeah, totally. And, you know, I've had every person that Sina and Mike, like we've all had, you know, neighbor issues before. And really, I think it comes from like fear that you're not going to be like an involved or good operator. And so like one of my mountain properties, my neighbor was like really nervous about it. He was an older gentleman. He'd lived there for a long time. And even though my property was very far from his, he just hated the idea of it. And he actually called me months later to be like, I don't know what you're doing, but like, thank you. Like this is going really, really well. And I feel that like any concern I've had, you guys have been quick and you care. And I'm happy that you bought the house. And it was just like a really sweet scenario. But like I want my neighbors to be happy, and I'll do everything that I can to keep the peace.
Yeah, that's a great tip for short-term rental owners or future investors who are interested. Always go to the neighbors and say, "Hey, this is what we're going to do. I know you might be a little bit nervous about it, but we have a very streamlined, way that we manage these. And if you ever have any problems with anyone, call me right away." If you're responsive, they'll appreciate it. And sometimes you do have a bad tenant. I mean, it's just what happens. But
Totally.
hey, it could be a long-term rental, and you could be stuck with them for 12 months. So there's always a trade-off, and that's part of letting them understand that you're a real business person, not some hedge fund who's buying short-term rentals and just assigning them to a VA to manage.
Totally. And it makes all the difference.
Yeah. Hey, it's Jonathan. On this brief interlude, I wanted to let you know that my team is expanding. So Streamline Properties has now expanded from New Jersey, New York, and Nevada to the state of Florida. And because of that, our Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing meetups are also expanding. So right now we do real estate investor meetups in the state of New Jersey once a month on the first Wednesday of every month. You can find more info about those on our website at streamlinedwithad.properties. But those meetups are now opening in the Lakeland area of Florida starting in May 2024. So be on the lookout for that. We're going to be doing once a month meetups in the state of Florida, and we're not done, as we expect to be opening in California and Utah very, very shortly. Let's get back to the show. So over the time frame of like the last couple of years, when we were watching all these headlines like, "Oh, short-term rentals are dead," how hard were you laughing out there doing what you're doing? Because it didn't, everyone I know who's really good and invested in the space, obviously nothing changed. They're in the higher echelon of knowing what to do in terms of hospitality. But what was your outlook when everybody was like kind of saying that it was all going to trash and STRs were going to be dead and regulations were going to come in every area?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I don't want to minimize the fact that, there have been some true challenges like over the past couple of years. I would say regulation is probably number one, and we could get into that. But my strategy really had to change from when I started in 2017. So when I started in 2017, it was like, guys, you could literally buy anything.
Yeah.
Like, go on to Facebook Marketplace, put it up. Like, I'm telling you, like, people are staying in my basement, and like, it's nice, but it's not like what you see in the market today. And so, the short-term rental market has matured over the last couple of years. Like, real money has been put into this asset class. Like, when I started, like, real investors didn't have anything to do with short-term rentals. Like, it was still, kind of a new play. And like, especially in non-vacation areas, you just didn't have sophisticated investors in the space. And so it was really like mom and pop, like an inherited house, and it was working. But then like, everybody started using short-term rentals during COVID. Like, we had this explosive growth. It was like banner years. Everybody was trying to like even just find a place to stay. And then everybody's appetite increased for what they were looking for in short-term rentals. Like, more homes became available that were professionally designed and professionally presented. And so those homes started rising to the top. And then everybody else who didn't set it up in a way that was professional started to decline. And
exactly.
So redesigns are like a really big thing now to be able to compete. And then people that are still just surviving by, not having automated messages, not doing smart pricing, not having professional photography, they're really not doing well in today's market. But the people who are professional and are doing all the things that you need to do in order to be successful, the cream is kind of rising to the top. And like, my properties are still doing great. Mike and Sina's properties are doing great, and many others that are, focusing on the right things.
Yeah, I really, really agree. And I've definitely had other guests verify that as well. It's just about being a business focused person. Like you said, you had to adjust to certain things, but when you're focused on this as your business, and it's not like just a random sidecar, you're going to adjust and stay to the top. But yeah, I think that's where the doom and gloom is really realistic for those people who aren't active managers, or who did the cabin in the woods that still has the furniture from 1973. Like, that's not attractive when there's more players in the game. But then there is this subset of like really cookie cutter STRs, which look okay in pictures. And then you get there and you're like, I mean, I don't like this. It's new, but it's like, has no character. It's just like, ugh,
50 Shades of Gray and Wayfair Special.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've all had it with gray. I mean, gray was my favorite color, but because everyone ruined it, I've had to pivot back to green. I just can't handle it anymore. The gray floors, it's enough. It's enough. Well, so in general, how important do you think the ambiance and kind of the marketing of a place is now in the short-term rental space?
It's everything. So I thought that, I was good at design, and I'm really not. And that's the first step of becoming a good short-term rental host, is just knowing, like, unless you are a designer and like you identify as a designer, you likely should not be doing your own design. And you really want to work with someone too who is going to specialize in short-term rental. Like for me, when I talk to clients and they're like, well, Chantal, should I buy in like the metropolitan area or should I buy in the mountains? And it always comes down to me, like, what are you willing to do from a design perspective? Because if you're going to be in a metropolitan area like Denver, like Nashville, like Miami, the homes there are not innately a destination. Like, they're just normal suburban homes. And so you really need to do something that's like going to stand out on the interior. It might need to be more funky. You might need to have a game room. You need to have amenities. Yeah. And like, that's where you'll see like more themes and things. And those are the properties that are doing really well. Whereas in the mountains or maybe on the beach, the home is truly a destination, and you need to lean into, why are people coming out there? So like, I'm not going to buy a property in the mountains that doesn't have a view.
Right.
Like,
yeah. Look at the back of a dirt patch. That doesn't really get the job done.
Right. Or, they renovated it so it looks like, an interior of a Denver place. Like, it needs to be like rustic and cabiny, and the same for like a beach town. Like, you need to have the proximity to the beach. You need to have like water views, or at least like be close enough to that. And like the design needs to fit like what they're actually spending their time there for. But if you're just in a metropolitan, I would say like you want to go more like over the top with like color. And I would say that I'm seeing a big shift too from minimalist to maximalist is what people are really enjoying in today's market.
Yeah, I mean, especially amenities wise, the more cool things you can have, because from the pandemic, a lot of people went there and they weren't going anywhere, and I think it is more about, how do you get your groceries there? How do you spend all the time there? That's why we're not staying in hotels, because they're boring and we can't cook and we can't do laundry. It's annoying. Maybe they have a pool, but it's not a pool for just us. And that's why I never stay in hotels. I haven't for 20, 30 years. I've always stayed in short-term rentals, because I like, I had kids. It's just easier. You don't have what you need in a hotel. Hotels are good for weekends for me, but like, I still prefer a short-term rental.
Yeah. And so having amenities for families is like a huge deal, because the reason that a family is staying there is because they don't want their 2-year-old in the room next door.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah. Through the door where they're just knocking on it the whole time. And there's just like, a TV, that's all you have, and like a tiny desk. Yeah. It just doesn't work. And that's where I see that it's never really going to change, because I think that there's a lot, if you look at, we, arguably have an affordable housing crisis. There's people who are mobile in jobs who could go 1 month at a time from Airbnbs and live in different areas and enjoy, the country like that. I think that's an interesting way to do it. I had a plan to do it 12 different places in 12 months, stay for a month, still possible, because my kids are older. But I really think that the traditional housing, as you've seen MTR explode, that was not even a thing. Nobody knew, partly it's because of the regulations, but are you strictly STR? Have you dabbled at all with midterm rentals as well?
Yeah, so our team has helped for sure with midterm rentals. What I see my clients in our market doing the most is during our slow season, a lot will start pivoting to MTR. So like in our non-ski areas, like March through October is our highest season. And so November through February, you can still get booked, but you're not making that much money during that time. Yeah. And so great strategy is to do MTR, have your mortgage covered like during that time, maybe make a little bit of money, but it's just lot less intensive. And so that's where I've seen it work best. As far as like MTR as a strategy, there's things that I like about it. I really like it for people that have like existing properties that make sense. You know, maybe you're near a destination like a hospital, or, you know, maybe you have like a small condo that wouldn't work for short-term rental. I don't love it yet. Like, I feel like there's not a ton of data to show you exactly what to expect from, you know, a revenue standpoint. The vacancy kind of freaks me out because, you know, it's hard. Like, if you miss like a couple of weeks, well, that's like 2 weeks that you weren't making income, and there's nothing you can do to, you know, fill that time. And I think that you'll, you know, on average make about 1.5 times long-term rental, which might just cover the extra vacancies. So I think that it's not a high cash flow strategy.
Yeah, those are good points. And I think the people who are really good at it, they're in the top 0.001%. Like, they have a thing, and they also have built the relationships where they're not only doing hospital or travel nurse, they have insurance. So there's a lot of opportunities there. But yeah, I think it would be hard I think short-term and mid-term are very hard for new investors who have no guidance. You know, those are the ones that they put on the market and you're like, are you serious? Or somebody says, like, I was reading in the forums on Bigger Pockets, and someone said, well, I have $50K to invest. You know, I want to do a short-term rental. I'm like, that's the furnishing fee. Like, that's your designer and furniture. What are you getting the down payment for? Like, this stuff costs a lot if you want to be at the top. Because if you spend all that money, half furnish it well, you're just going to put it on. And in 6 months, you're going to be at the bottom of the algorithm. No one's ever going to hear from you again.
Yeah, for sure. Like, you have to know like where you're starting and what resources you have to be able to do that. And back to what you're saying with the midterm rental, like there are people, to your point, that are really successful in the space. But the funny thing is I feel like a lot of people that want to get into midterm rental want to do it because they feel like it should be less active than short-term rental. And I'm like, you have to make these relationships with these like insurance brokers. You have to stay top of mind. And sure, like you can automate all of that, but it doesn't really feel that much like less active to me if you're someone who's really making the money in it. And so I think just understanding that like real estate investing in general, like while we're all chasing passive, like if you want to be truly passive, syndication is a good idea.
Yeah.
Whereas everything else, like even long-term rental, sure, you don't hear from them for 12 months, but then at the end of their term, you might have to completely renovate your unit. And so it just, you know, pick your poison.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's almost funny when people say, yeah, I want to get passive income, want to knock out some short-term rentals, manage it myself. It's like, you've just hired on another 9-to-5 job. Like, you're a doctor and now you have this. You don't understand what you're in for. Like, you can't automate everything, and you can't automate responses to there's mice in the house or, you know, the neighbor next door park. Like, these things are not possible. So I do think that's a really important point, because I always say, even if you want to get management, you still have to manage the manager, and short-term and mid-term management costs a lot. It's not 10%. You know, in some areas it's up to 25%. So that cost there is going to still not be passive, because if you don't watch it, you're still going to be losing money.
Mm-hmm. I totally agree. I think in real estate investing, like you're building residual income, not completely passive.
Yeah. So if a brand new investor came to you right now and their finances were vetted, but they didn't really know what to do, what would be the first piece of advice that you would give them, assuming they're interested in your market?
Mm-hmm. So I truly believe like that in our market, the best cash flow strategy is short-term rental. And so if they had like decent finances, we would discuss like whether or not it made sense for them to start with like a primary residence, a second home, an investment property. There are like creative ways for people to get access to more money, whether that's like through 0% interest, like credit cards or personal loans, or through HELOCs, like for the down payment plus furnishing. And so I think we would just kind of see like, what do they have access to? And then we would go through like, what are they excited about? Because I think something that's important is I've had investors that are like, well, I don't really care what I buy. I just want it to make money. And I'm like, well,
I don't like working with them.
Yeah, it's, you know, at first I thought that was a good thing. But then I realized like if they don't have any attachment to the property, typically they don't want to spend the time, effort, or money to make it something really great. And that goes for every strategy. So if you're buying a short-term rental property and you're like, I don't get why anybody would want to stay here, you're not going to do a good job working with your designer. You're not going to do a good job marketing the property. When things get slow, you're going to be like, I knew it. Like nobody in this area. And so like, I like to talk to people about like, well, what makes sense to you? Like, do you like something in the mountains? Do you like something in the metro? Are you, a medical professional and you get why people would want to like rent this room for a month? And so I figure out like, what is their belief system? And I've seen that people that follow the things that they intrinsically enjoy tend to do so much better because they just get it.
Yeah, I agree with that as well. And I think it also puts too much pressure on us as agents or advisors when someone says, I'll invest anywhere as long as it's a good return, because we're immediately getting blamed when something goes wrong, when it's like, you're not giving me anything. So I'm the same as you. I really want to understand the why behind it. And I think it is very, very important for someone to be interested in the area and to be interested in the type of asset. And would you agree with me? To me, my sister and I, we've had short-term rentals, and a lot of the times we just use them. Like we really got them as vacation homes. And then we were like, oh, wow, this is like in the beginning before Airbnb, Vrbo, and HomeAway. We're like, my sister was smart. She's like, I'll just rent these. I'm like, that sounds great. We don't have any of our stuff here. So she would make a ton of money. And then for our kids and stuff, we would just meet up there and use them. Don't you think usage is a huge advantage of STR?
Absolutely. Like my husband and I, our favorite investment is like an hour west of Denver. And it's in this like little no-name town, but it's like a 4-bedroom A-frame. And anytime it's not booked, like we try to go out there.
Right. You're like, hey, it's open and it's too late. No one's going to book now. Like that's a freebie.
Yeah, let's just go. And, it's funny because I feel like so many people think like, oh, like I really can't have my cake and eat it too. Like there's no way I could, have a property that I really love and that's going to make me money. But the funny thing with short-term rental is like, if you're a reasonable person with reasonable interests, like likely there's other people who are going to love that as well. And so like, that's, my second highest earning property, it grosses like 200,000 and we probably clear like 60K off of it and we love it and get to use it. And I hope it's going to be something in our family for a very long time.
Yeah. And I think thinking that way of, hey, what would I like? If all these amenities are things that I would like, putting them there is only going to help me make more money. I mean, it's why everyone's, putting pickleball courts. And I really hope the pickleball craze stays, because if not, there's going to be a lot of things turned into basketball courts at some point. But yes. I do think it's important because look, for especially for like larger rentals, like Brockway is one that I know he's finishing now. Like you need to have stuff for them to do, because a lot of times that's going to be groups coming together, not necessarily a party home, but like could be 3 families or a family reunion. Like they need to have stuff to do. I mean, this is the whole point of why we don't stay in a hotel, because there's just one room. If there's a movie room downstairs, like that's awesome. It's just great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's, you're getting to play a very important role in someone's life. Like it could be like a birthday, a honeymoon, a family vacation. And so it's just like a really special thing to be a short-term rental host and be able to contribute like to their forever memories. And when you think about like the fact that like this is their vacation, like they've like set aside time and money to like come out here, like take that seriously, because that's typically like a very like sacred time. And like those that do take it seriously, they understand that we're in like the hospitality business, their businesses really thrive. But then, people that are just trying to, not put any of their heart into like their investments, they're missing the little something that makes these stays really special.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because I can remember times where we were going to short-term rentals. There's been very few that didn't match up, but we were in LA and we pulled up on one and it was myself and my kids and my sister and her kids. Like it's a lot of people and a lot of stuff. And like we pull up and it was a bait and switch. Like the front was the same, but half the house was like undone. There was stuff stored. There was like bikes and stuff everywhere. And we immediately canceled and, stayed in like a modified-ish hotel. But it is really good, I think, to be a great host. You have to know that like vacations are really important to people. They spend a lot of money. Maybe they're only taking 1 or 2 a year. If you mess that up, like they should be coming for you, because that's like they spent their whole year waiting to take this week-long vacation only to find out that your swimming hole is not open. in the summer, it's a disaster.
Yeah, I just think it's so important. And like the people who get that, they're still able to scale. Like they're setting their investments up like with longevity in mind. So
yeah, but even as like real estate agents for doing, regular traditional home sales, it feels great when you hand the keys to someone when they're buying a home. But I think you have to take that feeling to the short-term rental and know, like, when you get that review and they had a great time, like you've really done something to, like you said, enhance somebody's life during that year. You can have an impact. It doesn't always have to be some type of like overtly social impact, but that's really, really a good impact on a family to be able to provide, everything that they wanted and for them to not be missing anything when they're there. Because when you go to stay at short-term rentals and then, something doesn't work or you can't find something, it really does downgrade like the experience.
Yeah, it really does. And I think like what we're touching on here too is just, follow the things that are in alignment like for you, because you can do like everything works, like multifamily works,
right.
Works, short-term rental works, foreclosures work, like all of it can work. But like, what do you want to spend your time doing?
Yeah. No, I agree. And I think people kind of, they're on social media. And I mean, I always say this though on the podcast, I'll get off a short-term rental and I'm like, got to have more short-term rentals, got to get back to it. Then someone comes on with a land flipping thing. I'm like, that sounds pretty cool. It's like I'm my own worst enemy. But then right after an hour after I do more research, I'm like, oh, that's why I'm a terrible landlord. Like multifamily is not for me. I don't want to do that. I like short-term rental because you can create buffers. And if you do it correctly, which we learned all our lessons 20 years ago about everything being in the description and how when somebody gives you very fair feedback, that's something you're missing in the description. And I think for destination STRs, it's even more important to be very, very clear on what they're getting into, where they are, how easy it is to get to town. Because don't you think that the worst short-term rental guests are sometimes really our fault because we didn't prep them the right way?
Yeah, it's all about like honesty, preparation, setting expectations. And so if you're like just promising something that's not possible, then yeah, they're going to be horrible guests and it is your fault.
So where do you think you're going on your personal investing profile? Are you just sticking with short-term rentals because you're so good at it now? And especially because you have that advanced data for the entire area in Colorado?
Yeah. So for me, like if I could have my dream scenario, I would have a short-term rental in every short-term rental friendly place in Colorado. Like it's my hometown. I feel like I have an advantage there because of that. I have a lot of experience in the space. I know what to look for. And so I really like that. I think something else I think about for my portfolio a lot is just diversification. So I have metro properties as well as mountain properties. I like the idea of, maybe a commercial asset in there. But I know that like every different property has, inherent benefits and inherent risks. Like if I go super unique and build like tree homes, that doesn't have the same exit strategy as me buying a multifamily property in Denver Metro that I could convert to midterm or long term. And so I really just try to focus on consistently buying and buying a lot of different types of assets to build like a diverse portfolio. Some are going to gross more than others. Like obviously the tree houses can gross a ton of money, but my others are just consistent, easy to sell, easy to rent long-term. And so I ultimately like a lot of different types of assets within the short-term rental space.
Yeah, I think that's important that you can be diversified in even a small diversified space, especially if you're really open to what you can do to places. I mean, short-term rentals are fun, but I think we've verified in this whole conversation, you really have to be into it to be good at it because you have to be providing something that's much, much bigger and better than what I used to stay at. And I really liked all the short-term rentals and timeshares that I stayed at because they were kind of kitschy Florida places. It worked at the time. But yeah, now my expectations are different.
Mm-hmm.
I want more stuff to do. I want ping pong or something that's going to be fun, for my kids at any age, because it just gives you more to do and it makes you not have to leave the environment. You can stay there and enjoy it like it's a home.
Yeah, you're helping people connect.
Yeah, I agree completely. Chantal, where is the best place for people to get in touch with you? Is it at thegoodneighbors.com?
That is a great place to get in touch with me. I'm also on Instagram at Chantal Duame.
Yeah. And that is ChantalDuame. I know you'll read it in the notes, but sometimes you're really hopped up when you're listening and you got to like follow Chantal right now. Get to it. The Instagram's great. And obviously, once Mike and Sina told me about you, I was already following you. But I really think that I've talked with this about a lot of guests, and it's very common with guests that I've had on the podcast because it's what I gravitate towards. I like people whose social media adequately shows who they are and what they do. And yours definitely does that. You get a full vibe for who you are. You're exactly the way that I see you on social media. And I think that's a really big trust value proposition for people out there to know.
Jonathan, that means the world to me. I really appreciate that. And likewise, like I
appreciate it.
Yeah, I love this podcast. I love the holistic approach that you have because while yes, it's about money, it's also about purpose and alignment and all that good stuff. And I think that it's so important.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited we got this done. And now I'm already sure from our pre-conversation that we're going to stay in touch on a lot of things, but I really appreciate you spending the time. I am going to make my way out to Denver soon, and I look forward to meeting you in person soon.
Likewise. Thanks, Jonathan.
All right. That was Chantal Duame of Good Neighbor Realty. I'm Jonathan Green. We'll see you next episode. Wait. You have reached the end of the show. This is the part where you're going to get ready to check out, but I've actually changed this part. For over 120 episodes, you heard the same thing. Well, now I've changed it. I've thought about doing intros to the next episode, but I'm going to hold off on that for now. These are my pitches at the end. I've got nothing to sell you at all, but I do want to remind you that it really would help us if you support the podcast in the right way. All that means is subscribing to the podcast so you get it on Monday and Thursday, writing us a 5-star review if you believe that we deserve a 5-star review, sharing it with your friends, and being a participant in the Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing community. Soon there's going to be a new website launched. Maybe when you're listening to this, it's already going to be out there. That's where we're going to have collaboration. You're going to be able to see a lot from the guest. It is coming soon, and I just want to tell you, from me to you, I don't know how I got here, over 100 episodes. I'm so appreciative of you listening to the podcast and especially sticking around to hear this part. We'll see you next episode.